So like I mentioned, this is hopefully first of many webinars. So I appreciate you guys all joining. It sounds like you guys are in a variety of different life states, have different viewpoints. So I just welcome any feedback afterwards because I hope to do this more and more in the future. So this is my first one. So I put together quite a bit of content. Just let me know also if you guys have any questions, please post them in the chat. Connie is my colleague and partner at Willowmar, so she'll be kind of moderating the chat. And if there's any questions that come up, she'll bring them up if they're kind of relevant to the slide, but we'll also have time at the end to address any Q&A. And this is also just like no pressure. It's an opportunity for me to share my perspective, hear what people are thinking about right now. So this is just a no judgment free zone. Okay, so thank you guys all. I think most of you actually came to my real estate launch party. I joined Willowmar Real Estate. I'm really proud to join this boutique real estate firm. Actually, I know many of the partners from my Berkeley days. And just a couple of stats just to share about the Willowmar team. So we're 15 team members. What's really unique about Willowmar is that a majority of our business is actually very organic through past clients or referrals. We currently rank 1.5% in terms of volume and transactions in the nation. And we've already sold more than $400 million worth of real estate. And we represent over 350 homes. So these are just some interesting stats. Willowmar did start in the Bay Area, but we now have a team in Los Angeles. So like I mentioned, Connie is on the line as well, and she covers the East Side. So anywhere from Pasadena, SGV, San Marino, Highland Park, Sierra Madre, she covers that side. And I am the West Side agent. So I've been helping clients like Nishant on the West Side. So I know there's a lot of debate of like, what's the West Side? But these are just a few of the cities that I cover with my clients as well. So just know that we're both in Los Angeles and the Bay Area. So if you or your friends are looking to buy or sell, Willowmar is a great brokerage firm with a really amazing team. So I highly recommend. All right. So I know we talked a little bit about it, and I've chatted with a few of you individually about this webinar, but I just wanted to address like, who is this webinar for? What is my target audience? And also, what do I want you guys to take away from this webinar after the hour? So I know, Ken, you mentioned there's a lot of market instability and the macroeconomic dynamics that are going on right now. So I did want to touch upon that. But number one, really wanted to cater this presentation to current renters who are wondering, is this the right time to buy for them? Whether it's their life stage or given the economy, is this a time to buy? Also, first-time home buyers who feel very overwhelmed by the process. I know that when I bought my first home, it was really, really overwhelming, and just navigating through all the different levers of buying a home, what kind of agent I should work with, all of that was really, really intimidating. So I'm hoping to sort of demystify a little bit about buying a home. And then lastly, like I mentioned, just what's going on in the market and how does timing factor into your decision of whether you want to buy or not? All right. So a couple of agenda items we'll be covering. So number one, there's a lot of misconceptions, but I wanted to distill it into top 3 misconceptions from my viewpoint about renting versus buying. Second, is real estate recession proof, right? So Ken, again, I'll pick on you a little bit more. You mentioned the macro economy. There's a lot of uncertainty going on right now. So it's very natural to think, is this the right time to add real estate to my portfolio? And we'll talk through that a bit more. And then finally, I'm a very data-driven and quantitative person. So when I decided to make the move and buy my own home, I was really trying to wrap my head around the numbers. My rent was extremely good. I was renting a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco for $1,500. And it was really challenging for me to justify why would I more than triple my cost in housing if I'm already just living so lean and have a really good rental? And so I actually have a template that I use to help me understand and get really granular. So I'll talk through a little bit about that and just like the data and how you would make a decision. It could be helpful for you to think through. And then finally, we'll close with Q&A. But like I mentioned, if there's any questions that come up, please feel free to plop them in the chat and we can address them as we go. All right, let's get going. Okay, so one of the top misconceptions I hear from clients or from people who maybe are on the side of wanting to buy, they're saying, why would you rent? You know, renting is always a waste of money. But the reality is it's really not that straightforward, especially something that you said, Iris, really resonated, right? If you are moving to a new city, you don't really know how long you want to settle in that new city. I think, Iris, you said that you've lived in cities for 2 years. And, you know, it's not, maybe you end up staying in LA for longer, but there's a perception and there's an ease of knowing you could pick up and go at any time. So there is that sense of flexibility that renting does offer. Say you're relocating for a job, you don't know how long that's going to be. Obviously, renting can really feel more secure from that aspect that you can kind of pick up and go. However, the flip side of that is when you are renting, you are paying for someone else's mortgage, specifically your landlord's, and you're not building any equity. So the rule of thumb that I recommend to clients is that if you're planning on staying put for at least 3-ish years, you know, buying can actually really make more sense and cost you less in the long run, and you're building wealth for yourself. The reason why I say approximately 3 years is that there are certain fixed costs and transaction costs that do come with buying. And so by spreading that out over the long run, you're making buying a really worthwhile investment versus renting. Next one. Okay. So another misconception I hear about is I need to save up 20% to buy a home, right? So say you're looking to buy a home that's at least $1 million. $200,000 is an intimidating number. And depending on where you are in your savings plan, that can be a really massive number to feel like you can't really get into the real estate market until you amass that amount of wealth. However, I wanted to debunk this because there are so many loan products out there that are available, and you really don't need 20% down. So I wouldn't fear letting this myth kind of delay your path to ownership. There are a lot of buyers who purchase with as little as 3% down, anywhere from 3 to 10% down. So there are some trade-offs to this. The 20% down rule, I think a lot of times comes into play because if you put down at least 20%, you don't have to pay PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. So that's kind of where people like to hit that 20% if they're able. However, worst case, you are able to get into the market a bit earlier. You put down less, like 3 to 10%, and you will have to pay this PMI, but that is often temporary. It can be tax deductible, and it really allows you to build that equity, that home ownership equity sooner. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there so people don't think there's this like rule of thumb where you have to amass this 20% amount of wealth before you get in.
How much usually is the PMI in relation to the percent down that you put down?
Yeah, so usually it's anywhere from 0.3% to 1.5% of your loan amount. So say, for example, you're borrowing $500,000, that PMI could be anywhere from $1,500 to $7,500 per year, which is really like $125 to $625 per month. And that rate can really change depending on a lot of factors like your credit score, your down payment size, right? So say you end up paying more like 10%, your PMI percentage will go down versus if you put down 3%, for example. And also there's the loan type. If it's a fixed rate loan versus like an ARM, that can change the percent as well. And finally, your debt to income ratio, which is something that all lenders will look at, will also influence that rate.
Yeah, we work with quite a few different lenders, from direct private lenders to mortgage brokers, and it's really great because we always have clients chat with a few different ones to figure out which program best meets their needs. We just had one of our go-to lenders help our clients buy a condo with 5% down, and so every program is different, and it's good to have those options.
Yeah. And I think that's also part of choosing a really good agent. Agents have a lot of contacts on their side, including, a reputable lender. And I think, Connie, you mentioned there are like grant programs as well, right? So I think City National Bank offers first-time home buyers $50,000 in closing grant credit. So there's just so many different programs out there to consider that just talking to a variety of quality lenders will provide.
Yeah, and it always changes. Back when First Republic used to exist, they had a really great closing grant program. Chase had one at some point. Now City National Bank is the newest one, and they have up to 50,000 in closing costs credits. Of course, there are requirements that you have to meet, but it's good to kind of know these options. And any smart agent will kind of have good lender contacts who can share more about this.
Yeah. And I really want to emphasize, when we put down offers for homes, it's really about the whole package, and having an entirely holistic, strong offer strategy and a good agent can make some low down payment buyers more competitive, right? So every seller is different. Their situation is different. Say, for example, they've bought another home. They need to move really quickly. Then that's the intel that we would gather on your behalf to, make sure the escrow period is a little bit shorter, and then the down payment is less of a big deal. So I really emphasize the whole package of your offer versus this is just one component of it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Iris. Any other thoughts on this slide?
You bring up a good point about this last bullet point, Heather, about sellers caring more about certainty, not just down payment size, because on paper, especially in a competitive situation, when a buyer is putting, 5% down and there are maybe other offers that show 20% down, it can seem less competitive. This is an interesting point because sometimes we do have cases where our clients are able to actually put more down, but they choose not to for whatever reason. We will show whatever our buyer client can put down, however high as an amount. And actually on the back end, when going into contract, the buyer and the lender will work out exactly how much they put down. And it doesn't not necessarily have to reflect what's written in the contract. But say in the case where it is a lower down percentage, there's so many other factors, as Heather mentioned, that do weigh into the overall offer package. And one of those being just like strong agent to agent relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Connie. All right. Third misconception: I should wait for the market to crash. So I hear this all the time. I think about the fact that I wish I bought in 2009, when my parents were like, "We can even help you." And it's one of those things that my rule of thumb is really, it's not about timing the market. It's really about time in the market. Waiting for that perfect time, it leads to missed opportunities. The sooner that you are able to get in to the real estate market, the better. And it builds more equity, it builds more wealth for longer. So if you look at the right, I actually pulled this from the US Census Bureau of median housing prices back in 1960. So obviously there are some short-term dips and rises, as is the case for any type of investment. But you can see holistically, on average, real estate does tend to rebound and grow. And so I really want to emphasize that home ownership is a long game. It's not a get rich quick move. And while you're not participating in the market, while you are renting, it's not building any equity or wealth. You're, again, paying for your landlord's mortgage. And my whole philosophy is you need to live somewhere and might as well get into the market if you are able to. Of course, ultimately, what matters isn't about what's going on in the market. It's really about it's a personal decision, right? I know that there's obviously real estate investors who are looking at this purely from an investment perspective, but for the vast majority of you, it's about your lifestyle. Are you outgrowing your rental? Do you need to upsize for your family? Do you need to be closer to your job? Are you able to pay the monthly housing cost? If that is something that you can afford, that is ultimately a personal decision, and it's more than just timing the market. Okay. Any thoughts on that? Ken, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that because I know you
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the charts and data. Love it, but I think the future is to be determined. I would caution that simply looking back, what, 50 years may not be a true view of the future. I think I also question, not challenging, don't have to agree, but like I would also challenge like I think the world and our economic order is really interesting. And you look at like how we structured our current economic system, and you think about wealth inequality, the consumers are really the driver of these things. And I think we've reached the point where in our current monetary system, it's really hard to justify in my mind how I can imagine most consumers being able to afford homes. So I think about like the core truths, like who are buying the homes and how are these consumers purchasing housing? And maybe really just to have an economy where, it's the top 10% that can actually own homes. But that does bring to question for me some challenges to what we see in the chart here. Like simply 50 years is not our human history. And simply the history does not determine our future path. But that's a whole nother topic, way deeper. That's just how I see it. Love the data, it's great, but like I do question our economic order and how that changes over time and how that affects us in the future.
Hmm.
Another factor I'd add to this is our population growth. Like we just simply don't have enough inventory housing to meet our growing population. So I think that's one way to look at it, especially in Los Angeles and California in general. But when it comes to kind of I think another discussion might be property type, because certainly we have limited surplus of, limited supply of single family homes, but we do have more condominiums. And so there's different demand for both types of properties or the varying types of properties.
Yeah, I don't want to be a crazy person speaking too much, but I think it's really interesting. You look at Japan, like look at stagflation, decreasing birth rate. There's scarcity, but oh gosh, like if we are truly going down the path of Japan, we'll see a pause in asset values and the decrease in working labor pool, whatever. So it's like, who knows? It's really interesting to see how it unfolds in the future if we are a Japan path or not.
Hmm.
I had a question, and I'm not sure if you guys have the data or not, but do you know in LA how long someone owns their first home, whether it's a condo or a single family home within the LA market?
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's the average first-time homeowner is 7 years. Or the first home. And historically, people own their home, maybe in our parents' generation for 30 years, it was a very long-term hold. Today's kind of market with higher prices, with changing lifestyle needs, the average first-time homeowner turnover is 7 years. So that's why when you said you move every few years, I've actually moved every few years too. I used to live in San Francisco, bought my home there. We moved 3 years later and then we bought a home in Oakland. We sold that 2 years later and then moved out to the Pasadena area. And fortunately did really well each time. But I think also a big part of it was the type of property we bought, where it was located. But good to know, whenever we have buyer clients looking for homes, we usually say to kind of plan to be there 3 to 5 years. That would make the most sense to actually want to invest. But if it's less than that, then renting might be the safer bet.
Yeah, I also just wanted to point out, just like with any investment, there's fluctuations up and down, and hopefully you're not in a position where you need to sell because you need to liquidate that. But if it is a dip for whatever reason, you do have the option to rent out your place. So I think it's a little less scary to think about, like that is always an option, and you can kind of time the market from that perspective too.
That's true.
Yeah, so I think 7 years, that's the average, but who knows, maybe people are holding on, living in it for half that time and then renting it out. But there's always that flexibility. All right. So next slide is just around, is real estate recession proof, and how do we think about that? So I do want to say that there really is no investment that we can say is totally recession proof. And that being said, there's really no risk. There's no reward with no risk, right? And while that is true, real estate has proven to be one of the most reliable long-term investments. I have a lot of stats here, but basically, to Ken's point, there are, interest rates are pretty high right now. Of course, we talked about different loan products that you can get, but they're kind of hovering around that 6 to 7%. Prices are up, but instead of looking at this as, oh, this is instability, this really does reflect strong demand. Connie mentioned there's a housing shortage in California in comparison to our growing population, and the buyer demand really does keep those values stable. So, there really hasn't been a crash that we have seen. And then finally, buying just really locks in your housing costs, while unfortunately with rent, you are beholden to your landlord in terms of increasing that rent. Of course, there's rent control, and that's a whole other conversation in California. But depending on when your home was built, the landlord can raise that rent, and there's a sense of loss of control. Whereas when you buy, you can kind of lock in that rate over time. I also did want to mention that when looking at the last 4 to 6 recessions, home prices actually were flat or rose, in fact. And I know 2008, 2009, a lot of us graduated during that time, and we did see housing crash, but that was really driven by irresponsible lending versus the conditions that are present today. So that's not really happening right now. And just some stats about LA. I know, Iris, you asked about Los Angeles in particular. I thought this was really interesting. In LA, on average, housing is increasing about 2.7% year over year. And 47% of homes have sold above asking in April of 2025. And 67% of homes are selling within 30 days. So it really indicates that strong demand for well-priced properties. Just to kind of show, if you bought in the last couple of years, your property is moving fast if you're trying to sell, and also higher than what you bought it for, most likely. On the flip side, I know Ken mentioned, it's like maybe buying isn't accessible to all of us because it is so expensive. However, I do want to note that right now, what we're seeing, just as we're having this webinar and having these discussions about the uncertainty of the macroeconomic dynamics, there is a pocket of opportunity that we've seen where clients are able to negotiate more in this time of uncertainty, and higher rates are oftentimes those pockets of opportunity, because once interest rates do go down, we do expect to see even more buyers enter into the market. So in a way, it's better to get in now when interest rates are a little bit higher. You can probably get a better price for your property. And obviously in the future, if and when interest rates do come down, you are able to refinance. I think about my situation, and I bought my home in 2022, and I did lock in a pretty good interest rate, but I also had to pay more for my property. So it's just something to keep in mind that interest rates and your home price are often counter to each other. So I wouldn't be too intimidated by interest rates being high right now. Any thoughts on that? It's a lot of data. So
I have a question unrelated to this.
Yep.
Your take on the trends of new builds compared to prior years? Like, do you find like there are new homes being built like at a faster rate now than before, or slower than before?
I can chime in. I would say definitely slower because of interest rates being higher. Construction costs are a lot higher, and just the overall cost of housing. So overall construction has steadied and wasn't kind of crazy building like, 2008, 2009, we saw a lot of new construction. We still see pockets of it. Also, there's just less parcels to build on. But yeah, I would say new construction has slowed down since the past 10 or so years.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think when you think of new construction, They are investments by developers trying to hit a certain margin. In LA, obviously, with the fires, renovations are contractor rates, they are higher now. So that also contributes to less rapid construction that we're seeing. And obviously, with tariffs and stuff, everything is a little bit more expensive. So the limited parcels, like Connie mentioned, in addition to the rising costs, have kind of slowed down construction.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we're moving into the more tactical side of how to crunch the numbers. Like I mentioned, when I was deciding whether to buy or to keep renting, I couldn't wrap my head around, why would I buy if my rent is $1,500? Like, why would I pay way more for a home? I just needed to understand the math. And so the way I really think about it is, when you're renting, that money does go down the toilet, per se. You're not building any equity. It's cash that you're spending. Obviously, it does buy you the privilege of flexibility, but from a raw numbers basis, it's not really coming back to you in any way. When you're buying, while I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be tripling my cost to buy, but the real apples to apples comparison is looking at the portion of your housing monthly cost that actually goes down the toilet as well. And so what is that down the toilet cost? It's really the monthly cost that isn't coming back to you. So for example, principal, that's part of your monthly payment. That is equity that you keep. Mortgage interest and property taxes, those are oftentimes tax deductible. And so those tax savings come back to you, after you file your taxes. HOA fees, homeowners insurance, those are also categorized in the down the toilet cost. So the way I think about it is to make a true comparison to rent, focus on what you don't get back as part of your total monthly payment. So the math equation is really the down the toilet cost of buying a home is taking your total monthly cost, subtracting out the principal, which is equity you keep, and then subtracting out the tax savings that comes back to you. That number is what you really want to compare to the rent that you would be paying if you decided not to buy. A couple of things I want to call out here is, when I was renting and I was paying $1,500, I ultimately bought a home that was 3 bedrooms. So that's really not apples to apples. You want to take a look at the down the toilet cost of the home you're considering and comparing that to how much would it cost you to rent that place, right? That's kind of more of a true comparison to consider and make the real evaluation. Does that make sense to you guys?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And just another thing is, obviously, this is one part of the equation. You still have to set aside the HOA fees, the homeowner's insurance, all of which go to your total cost per month. You really have to still evaluate, can you afford that monthly cost, and set that aside. While you are building principal, you're getting tax savings, that's not all liquid immediately, right? So you have to evaluate your own financial portfolio to say, is this amount of money I'm comfortable with setting aside? A really good rule of thumb is you want your housing cost, whether renting or buying, to be no more than about 30% of your gross income. So that's just a kind of a good rule of thumb, but everyone's situation is different. You might be able to stretch yourself a little bit. And that's another topic. I decided that I was comfortable with stretching myself a little bit. I was probably a little less than 30%, or sorry, more than 30%. And that's a whole other conversation, but you also have to consider, what is your financial situation? Are you in a job that you expect to grow in and increase your salary over time, for example? Because you're probably going to be staying in this property for, like Connie mentioned, maybe even 7 years. So it could be worthwhile stretching yourself in the beginning so you can kind of really grow with the home and still manage to afford it. So those are just some thoughts to think about. So the next is, I know there's a lot of numbers here, but as someone who is very data driven and numbers oriented, I actually have this spreadsheet that worked really well for me. This is actually my own numbers of my own home, but I am more than happy to share this with my clients just so, and I no one did this with me when I was buying. I kind of hoped that lenders would get this granular with me, but this was just very helpful for me to understand every input and how that translated into my down the toilet cost of buying, and then wrapping my head around how that would compare if I rented a similar space. And that led me to justify why buying was definitely worth it for me. So if anyone is interested in me walking you through this template and sharing it with you, just reach out. All right, so another part of crunching the numbers, a lot of clients and people say, okay, Heather, what about my opportunity cost for my down payment? Right? We already talked about it doesn't have to be 20%. It doesn't have to be that intimidating of a number, but oftentimes clients do think it makes sense to put 20% down so they don't have to pay the private mortgage insurance. So how do you think about the opportunity cost of that amount? And that's where the power of leverage comes in. But before I talk about power of leverage, I also want to mention that these other factors come into play when I think of buying a home. And number one is diversification, right? I think about adding real estate to your portfolio adds that diversity. You probably already have quite a bit of stock, I'm guessing, just kind of guessing and knowing a bunch of you. You probably have a lot of stock. You might have some crypto. Real estate really helps diversify your portfolio. And then secondly, we all know we need a place to live, and it's whether you're renting or you're buying. In my head, it's like, why not buy if you're able to afford it, to add that to your portfolio? And you get the pride of ownership of not being beholden to landlord and being able to enjoy your home as your own as well. And then this third function is really the power of leverage. So I'm sure most of you have heard about this, but it was very helpful to kind of truly understand this when I was buying my own home. The power of leverage is really that you're using the bank's money, so borrowed money. Of course, if you decide you're going to borrow money, I think most of us probably can't pay all cash for $1 million home. The power of leverage really leverages the bank's money to grow your investment. So in this example here, if you're buying $1 million home, you're putting 20% down. So that's $200,000. And that's 1/5, right, of the total home purchase. Say your home value increases in a year by 3%, which is a very realistic number. We've seen that to be the case in Los Angeles. Your return isn't just the 3% if you put all cash down. It's really 5x of 3%, which is 15%, because you're using borrowed money. So because you only put 1/5 of the investment of the whole home, you still get to participate in the entire home value increase, which is really 15%. And that really, this whole construct about power of leverage helped me understand why I wanted to add real estate into my own personal portfolio. Because, I think stock market obviously has some volatility, especially recently, but typically what's considered good for the stock market is about 10%. Whereas with real estate, with just a modest gain of 3% year over year, you can really get that 15% of return. And so just the power of leverage really magnifies your return. It's just the appreciation of the full home value, not just your cash investment. Does this make sense to people? Okay, cool. Thanks for the thumbs up, Todd. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, actually. So I just wanted to open it up to Q&A of anything. We actually have, I think, most of the partners on the call, Bran and Cliff. So if you guys have any questions, one of us can help field them. Or if there's anything that I covered that wasn't really clear, you guys can clearly reach out to me after. But I also wanted to take some time now to answer anything you guys have questions on.
I don't have any questions, but just a note that I love the numbers and how tactical it was. I understand it's a long journey as well, like as I'm going through with you. you have to think about financially, also emotionally, also especially in LA, how which area do you want to live in as well? That matters a lot. The barrier of entry is high, but I think it gives you a little bit more confidence of where you are.
Yeah. I mean, Nishant, I think you hit the nail exactly. It's such a process. I think, and the reason why I decided to go into real estate was I found it to be such a rewarding process. I almost feel like maybe it's not Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but there's almost different stages of buying a home psychologically to, first consider number one, do I even want to buy a home? Like, why not just keep renting? And then once you decide, okay, I understand why why it makes financial sense for me to buy, then it's like, okay, what do I want to buy? Is the world my oyster? There's so many different things to think about. And that's the job of a good agent, to help guide you in that process psychologically, financially. There's just so many different factors to consider. And then when you get to the place where you find your dream home, you might not even get it. And then that's very emotional as well. And there's strategy involved there. So I'm just really excited to support you, Nishant, in your journey. But yeah, it's a really rewarding path.
Totally. And you have to also take into account that the more expensive the house is, the more you like it. You just have to understand.
Right, right. Oftentimes the trade-off is the price. It's like, oh, well, if I pay more, then I'll get a home I like more. So yeah, totally understand.
Are there usually any stats about how much monthly maintenance of a house or condo is in the numbers as well, compared to usually when you rent, you don't need those numbers because there's always help that comes up. But when things like anything that happens in a house or a condo, they're big lump sum amounts, whether it's on the appliance or whether it's plumbing or whatever it is, they're usually like an average of how much it costs monthly.
Yeah, feel free anyone else to chime in, but usually I would probably estimate about 1% of the property's value per year. Obviously, that will fluctuate depending on, how old the property is. You can expect more for sure for an older property, which is why one of my clients really wants something pretty new. So that can add some headaches, and also just like how handy you are, right? Sometimes like my husband's really handy, so we can kind of get by a lot of times rather than paying for some of these maintenance costs. But I would allocate about 1%. And I mean, I think that is the downside to buying, right? When you rent, you can just call up your landlord and have them fix it for you. But I also view that as part of the package of pride of ownership. As a homeowner now, when something breaks, it's not great, but then you can decide how you want to go about fixing it. And I really feel like, oh, this is my home. I want to take care of it. But yeah, I think financially you want to set aside some money, liquid money for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so much of that, we always tell our clients, yes, we'll do inspections, and to learn as much about the home, we'll do all of our due diligence about the property. But of course, there are surprises that even an inspector might not find out, and there will be maintenance because you are a steward of the home. But part of calculating what costs might look like in the future definitely comes down to the age of the building, the infrastructure, how old the roof is, what the foundation is made of, is there any seismic updates that need to be made. So definitely a lot of due diligence goes ahead in preparation to purchasing a home that your realtor will help you with.
Hey, sorry, I've been in and out of the car, but hi, thanks so much. Great session. Wanted to kind of ask more about the Willowmar team at this point then. In terms of kind of like the buying and selling process, how have you guys as a group differentiated from other teams or other approaches that have been impactful and meaningful for the clients?
Oh, I love this question. I feel like Bran, you should answer this. You've got some good representation from Willowmar here.
Yeah, well,
and Bran's one of our partners. She's based in San Francisco.
Thanks for the question, Patrick, and your baby is very cute. Nice arm decor. I would say if I had to pick one, it would be relationships. And so this is relationships, as Heather mentioned, when it comes to, or I think it was Connie actually, when it comes to negotiations, the networks that we have, the relationships that we have, we find that we can oftentimes leverage that on our clients' behalf. So it's relationships with other agents, but also relationships with vendors and the and what do we need to think about. I think that while you can't necessarily call up your landlord, you can call Heather, and Heather probably has
Did I lose
your
connection or?
HVAC, someone that's so that you know. Oh,
Maybe Bran, turn off your video. It's a little laggy.
oh, is it Charlie?
Yeah,
Okay.
that might help.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, for the relationships, it's relationships with other agents, relationships with vendors, and our relationships with our clients. You know, we really value the long term. So it's not just about like, how can we get this deal done? How can we fulfill this transaction? But we're thinking long term. So that I think shows up in the way that we service, right? And it's a full service experience, and we want to make sure that you have the best experience with us, because we're hoping that it's a long-term relationship for life.
Yeah. And just to add to that, thank you, Bran. When I bought my home, my own home buying journey, I actually worked with probably 4 different realtors, starting in San Francisco and then ending up in Los Angeles. And there's definitely, obviously there's the caliber and the skill set of like communication that's important with an agent, but who I ultimately bought with, I thought it was a fine experience, but I never really heard from her again. And something that really drew me to joining Willowmar is that we really pride ourselves in our relationship together. It's not just you are our client. We're forming hopefully a lifelong relationship. And part of our own kind of playbook or just philosophy is to keep in touch with our clients. Whether, you're expanding your home because you have a newborn, it's staying in touch because to us, it's a relationship business. So even though it's not quantitative, it is that white glove, heartfelt experience that you would get at Willowmar.
Yeah. Oh, another good example on the strategic sense. We just got clients into contract in Santa Monica, and the listing agents were planning to do a pretty big price reduction. And in knowing that, we knew that was going to drive, more interest of the home and likely bump up the price of the home ultimately. But in building rapport with the listing agent, and also having our go-to inspector be able to turn around an inspection within the 24 hours of going into contract, those all played really crucial moments in timing and just being able to get the property for our client.
Thank you for the question, Patrick.
I got a question. I
That's
think
helpful.
there's a lot of interesting stuff. I think my overall summary is I feel like it's definitely a very much like a lifestyle decision. Like for me, the driver for me to decide to buy a place is really around, okay, well, what kind of life do I want to live in the life I like my activities today? And I think the big driver is, okay, well, if I'm actually planning to have a child, it's gonna suck to have a child in an apartment and get noise complaints from the child like stomping all over, having, degenerates in the building being around my kid. I want to have like a nice yard for my dog, it's like perfect timing. For your client base, is that typically the main reason why people purchase, or is it more of the other reasons like, oh, I want to make a financial investment, have good leverage, believe it's gonna grow? Like, what's the mix of buying reason that you see really?
I really think it's all walks of life, all of the above. Obviously, there comes a necessity element, Ken, when you are expanding your family, you're outgrowing your home. That's when people might buy out of more necessity. But I bought when I was totally single, and I felt like for me, it was an empowering move physically and emotionally, and the right financial decision for me. So I really think it spans the gamut.
Yeah. To add to that, we get asked a lot of times like, well, when should I buy? And we always tell our clients it's when timing makes the most sense for you, and if it makes sense, because so much of it is your lifestyle. Like, does it make financial sense? Are you at a place in your life where you want to put some roots or think about this type of investment, because really it is. And that's how we see every kind of home purchase for our buyer clients is, yes, it's for their lifestyle, but it also is a big investment, and they go very hand in hand. Patrick, did you have a question as well?
No, I was just saying thanks for the previous response. But I will say also from just my own thought process, I knew that I wanted to have kids at some point, and that for me it was like a complete binary choice. Like I did not want to have a kid and then have a shared wall with somebody. Not because of noise, but just because of kind of like what Ken was saying, just in terms of just consideration for having your own space and allowing the kid to feel like they have their own space too.
Yeah, makes sense.
Also, we don't live in Asia, so you don't have to have a shared wall. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we have 1 minute left. Any other burning questions? If not, we can probably wrap up.
Great job, Heather.
Thank you.
Great questions. Those are all really great questions.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining. I welcome any feedback because I do want to do this webinar and other topics. If there's any of interest, please do let me know. And I'm more than happy to have another one of these with you guys. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Heather. This was really
you.
helpful.
Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good evening. Bye.